Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and today we have kind of a two-in-one. We have my April TBR and my suggestions and recommendations for Alcott April. So hopefully you have seen the announcement video about Alcott April, which is an event I am so excited about being asked to be a co-host. I believe it was Tiffany's idea at Beautiful Minutia. So she is hosting this month-long reading challenge, I guess. And Deea at Novel Idea and Kelli at Kelli Reads a Lot, Emma at The Bookish Princess, and I are all thrilled to be joining in with her and celebrating the life and the work of Louisa May Alcott throughout the month of April. So that is going to form the bulk of my reading in the month of April. But I'll have a few other things thrown in there. And plus the challenges that we have for reading Alcott April will take you into some other territory beyond the works of Louisa May Alcott herself. So lots of interesting reading ahead for all of us in the month of April. I am hoping to read a decent amount in April because I will be doing some traveling, and that will mean being a passenger either on a train or in a car. So that will give me some downtime to read that I don't normally have, plus some time off of work with spring break and everything. So I'm very excited to hopefully be able to do actually all of the prompts for Alcott April, as well as my regular reading with a little bit of overlap there. So to start off with, let's go through all of the Alcott April prompts and the recommendations I have for you and the books that I am planning to read myself for the month of April. First of all, our group read is going to be The Inheritance by Louisa May Alcott, which I believe was the first book that she ever wrote, but it wasn't published when she wrote it. It was more recently discovered and published towards the end of the 20th century. And I actually couldn't tell you right now. I know I've heard the storyline before, but I couldn't tell you what it is. Let's see. Set in an English country manor, the story follows the turbulent fortunes of Edith Avalon, an impoverished Italian orphan whose loyalty and beauty win her the patronage of wealthy friends until a jealous rival contrives to rob her of her position. In the locket around her neck, she carries a deep secret about her natural birthright, but an even greater truth lies hidden in Edith's heart, her deep reverence for the kind and noble Lord Percy, the only friend who can save her from the deceitful, envious machinations of Lady Ida. So that is The Inheritance by Louisa May Alcott, which is the group read, and it's not very long, so you should be able to fit that into your reading plan for April, and I am looking forward to reading that myself. So that is the first thing. And then each of us has a prompt. So Tiffany's prompt is to read some nonfiction about Louisa May Alcott or her time. So I have not yet decided what I'm going to read. I did pick up a couple of things from the library. This is called Eden's Outcasts by John Madison, and it is the story of Louisa May Alcott and her father. So, of course, her father was Bronson Alcott. What was his name? Yes, Bronson Alcott. And he was a famous transcendentalist and a man of ideas, and Louisa May Alcott very obviously seems to have taken after him in many ways. So this explores their relationship and their work and their writings, and that seemed interesting to me. Also, this is called American Bloomsbury by Susan Cheever, and Susan Cheever also wrote a biography of Louisa May Alcott. So she has more than one work of nonfiction about the Alcotts that would work for this. This one is not just about Louisa May Alcott, though. It's about Louisa May Alcott, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Margaret Fuller, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Henry David Thoreau, their lives, their loves, their work. So just the intersected lives of that community in Boston, which I'm also intrigued because it's not as long as the other. And so it seems more doable. And also, as I had mentioned in my announcement video, am planning to be in Boston at the first week of April, next week. So I am very interested in this, and it talks, you know, not just about Alcott, but about all of the people who lived up there and their lives and their work. So that interests me. I don't know, I might read this one, maybe not. I also, there is a biography that I can get digitally through the library, as well as a book, an audiobook of Marmee and Louisa by Ava LaPlante, which, so I have that book about Louisa and her father. This one is about Louisa and her mother. And that looks very interesting as well. I'm very intrigued by that. Some people, I believe, are reading Louisa May Alcott, Her Life, Her Letters, and Journals by Edna Dow Cheney, and I also can get that one through the library. So that is another one that interests me, kind of get the information straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, not just about her, but directly from her. So that is also intriguing to me. So which one will I pick up? I have no idea. We'll find out. But other ones that I will mention are Louisa on the Front Lines, which specifically focuses on Louisa's time during the Civil War and her work on the front lines. She was a nurse. And Louisa herself also wrote, I believe it was a series of essays about her time as a nurse on the front lines, and that is called Hospital Sketches, and it is readily available online, I believe at Project Gutenberg and elsewhere. So you can read that, and again, hear directly from Louisa about her experiences during the war. And then there is a popular biography of Louisa May Alcott by Madeline Stern, which is another, I believe she is one of the people who has quite heavily researched Louisa May Alcott's life. So that would be, I think, an authoritative biography, if I'm not mistaken. Then there is another one that is the Selected Letters of Louisa May Alcott, which I've not heard as many people talk about. Several authors together worked on editing and choosing these selected letters. So that's another option. That was on a list I came across that was written by Heidi Chavaroli of books that she recommends about Louisa May Alcott and her work and her time. And if you don't know, Heidi Chavaroli wrote a book called The Orchard House, which is a fictionalized book about Louisa May Alcott and Orchard House, which is one of the houses that she lived in Boston, Concord, near Boston. One book that I have read, a nonfiction book that I highly recommend if you love Little Women as much as I know many people do. It is a nonfiction book about Little Women and about the impact that it has had on American culture since, and even around the world, since the time it was written up until now. And it explores why it was so impactful, why everyone loves it so much, why does it still retain the influence that it has even in our modern era, what is it about the book and the story and the characters that draws us so much. So there's a little bit of analysis in there, but then it also delves into some of the history of Louisa May Alcott and how much of her was put, how much of her story and her personality and her life were put into the book, and her family's life and history. And it also goes into more, I don't know what the word is, practical everyday things surrounding the book, like various editions that have been published throughout the world, various adaptations, and how people have interpreted her work and all of that kind of stuff. It's incredibly interesting. I read it several years ago and really enjoyed it. And the name of that book is Meg, Jo, Beth, Amy: The Story of Little Women and Why It Still Matters. And that the author is Anne Boyd Rioux. Her last name is R-I-O-U-X. So that is a really interesting book that just kind of explores everything about Little Women from every angle. So if you are a fan of Little Women, definitely you'll want to read that nonfiction book. And then Deea's prompt is to watch an adaptation. So there are mostly a lot of adaptations of Little Women, which is all that I have seen. We are going to watch an adaptation of The Inheritance as a group watch. I believe on April 26th, it's a Friday, it's the last Friday in April. And we're gonna be watching that on Tiffany's Discord channel. So that's a lot of fun, and that can cross this right off your list. But if you're wanting some more Louisa May Alcott, I'm mostly familiar with Little Women adaptations. I don't know of others. So I'm just going to mention some that you may have heard of and may or may not have watched and may want to look into. So first of all, as far as movies go, there are two that kind of vie for favorite of the few that I've seen. And the 1994 one is really hard to beat. I really loved that one. That Winona Ryder played the character of Jo, and it's just really beautifully done. I watched it many times after it came out. I was a teenager, and I just really loved that movie, enjoyed it very much. And then there was the 2019 version that was produced by Greta Gerwig, and my sisters and I went and saw that in the theaters. And I was prepared to be disappointed because, I already love the 94 version so much. And, movies never do a book justice, right? Especially, it feels like the more modern the movie, the less likely it is to do justice. But I was pleasantly surprised and I really enjoyed it. And not everybody loved the ending and how it played out in the movie, but I actually really liked it and I thought it was great. So that is a good adaptation as well if you have not seen that one yet. And then I have also seen, and it's available to watch on YouTube for free, the 1949 version, which has Elizabeth Taylor as Amy. So that's a fun one to watch. I've seen it a couple of times. It's been a while. But that one's definitely interesting to watch. Then there's a 1933 version with Katharine Hepburn. I think it has been a really long time since I watched it, so I don't remember for certain, but I'm pretty sure Katharine Hepburn plays Jo in that story and in that adaptation. And obviously it was in the 30s, so it's an old one. We're getting close to 100 years. It's 90 some years old. So, it is what it is, but definitely worth watching if you're a Little Women fan. And then I have not seen, but I think you can watch at least significant portions of it on YouTube, the 1978 American TV miniseries of Little Women. And I think there is also a more recent Little Women miniseries as well, which I have not seen. So if you have seen that and you like it, let me know if it's worth watching. I think it was made in the past few years, if I'm not mistaken. And then there is a musical adaptation. Of course, I talked about this in my Books You Didn't Know Were Musicals video back last fall. And there is a musical version of Little Women, which if you can watch full-length productions of it on YouTube, like student productions, which aren't horrible. So that's fun to do. But if you have an opportunity to see it live, we saw professional production some years back, and we also saw a local college production, and both were wonderful. So the musical is really good and sticks. Obviously you can only capture some elements of the story, but it's really well done overall. So those are some adaptations you can enjoy, even if you don't watch the musical version. You can get the soundtrack easily on like Spotify or any of those services. So yeah, give the music a listen. It's a lot of fun. And then Kelli's prompt is to read a work that inspired Alcott. So I have a couple of suggestions myself related to that. The first one is Faust by Goethe, which is like a Mephistopheles story. And I know for sure that Louisa May Alcott read that book and was inspired by it, because this story, A Long Fatal Love Chase, was based on the idea in that story. And so this is kind of like a twist of it. And then she did the same thing with a later novel, not the same storyline, but she was also, again, inspired by it. So obviously it was a book that sparked her imagination and interested her. And I'm considering reading that one, possibly. So that's on my short list of ones for this prompt that I personally will choose to read. Another one is, I forgot to pull it. I have a copy of it, but I don't want to take the time to find it right now. But Elizabeth Gaskell's biography of Charlotte Bronte was apparently very encouraging to Louisa May Alcott during a difficult time in her life, a disappointing, discouraging time in her life, I think, especially in terms of her career and her livelihood. And so she really enjoyed reading that biography. So that is another one that if you have not read Elizabeth Gaskell's biography of Bronte, it's Charlotte Bronte, then That's a great one. It's a good book to read. So then I have a whole list of books that are mentioned in Little Women. Now, this list did not come from my memory. I knew of some of them, but this is not from my memory. This is a list that someone on the internet compiled. And of course we know it's on the internet, so it's totally true. Okay, so we're going with it. I did not vet and confirm that all of these titles were indeed mentioned in Little Women. My assumption in giving you this list is that since they are included in Little Women, mentioned in there, either directly or perhaps indirectly, with a reference, something about the story. I don't think all of them are direct references to the title of the book, but they mention like characters or whatever in the stories. Presumably, Louisa May Alcott read all of these books, and they stuck out to her enough for her to mention them in the story she was writing. So I'm going to tell you what these. Definitely, for sure, Dickens and Shakespeare seem to have been prominent inspirations for her. So I feel like you can't go wrong with Dickens or Shakespeare as someone whose work inspired Alcott. But here are some specific titles that she definitely mentioned in Little Women. Great Expectations by Dickens, of course. Evelina by Frances Burney is another one, and that one is really good. I read that several years ago and I enjoyed it. It was funny and it was humorous, and Jane Austen was also inspired by Evelina. So, you know, those are pretty strong recommendations. Jane Austen and Louisa May Alcott. Can't go wrong. Hamlet by Shakespeare, as well as his Macbeth and Midsummer Night's Dream were all mentioned in Little Women. Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. Now, I don't know, because this list was just a list of books. I am assuming that one or another of his fairy tales was mentioned in Little Women, and I can't right now think of which one. So if anybody knows, let me know which specific one. I didn't take the time to look that up, but I love Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. So I feel like that's a good choice regardless. Here is another one on my short list because so many people recently, I think due to Kate Howe's influence, have enjoyed reading this one. So I'm very interested in it, and that is The Heir of Redcliffe by Charlotte Young. So that one is going on my short list as well and is mentioned in the book. Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott, which has been a really long time since I've read that. Totally due for a reread because I remember nothing, but I really want to read that one. This is another one on my short list, Julie by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And I'll talk more about that, I think, in a minute. And then, let's see, Mary Stuart by Friedrich Schiller. And there was another one by Friedrich Schiller, Wallenstein by Friedrich Schiller. Both of those were Schiller. Both of those were mentioned in Little Women. Some others by Dickens include Oliver Twist and Pickwick Papers. So those would be good ones to read. And then Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. Highly recommend. That's a great book if you have not read it yet. A couple books by Samuel Johnson, The Rambler and Rasselas. Is that how you say that? I've not read anything by Samuel Johnson. He's like on my list of books that I want to read, but I kind of like at the same time don't really like want to from my heart. I want to from my head. Not that, yeah, I want to read them from my head, but not from my heart. So one of these days I'll get to him. And then I'd never heard of this one. Sarto Resartus by Thomas Carlyle. So there's one. Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Another good one. Obviously very influential in Louisa May Alcott's time. Vanity Fair by Thackeray. And I read this recently, The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith. So I can definitely recommend that one. It's very readable for being a book that's several hundred years old. Very readable and easy to follow. And then this I also had never heard of. So if anybody knows anything about this book, tell me. The Wide, Wide World by Susan Warner. There was one other, Undine, which I do remember this being mentioned in the book, but I know nothing about it. And the name of the author was like a really long name, and I like with 5 parts to it. And I didn't feel like writing that down because I was in a hurry. So I can't remember the author's name, but that's another one that is mentioned in the book. So books that inspired Louisa May Alcott. She was clearly quite well read and widely read. She read a lot of things from a wide variety of eras, both literature that was contemporary to her, but also books that were classics by the time she was reading them. So I feel like you can't go wrong with books that she felt were important enough to mention. And then Emma's prompt is to read a work written by one of Louisa May Alcott's neighbors. And so she was part of a very influential circle of transcendentalists, and these men, and there were some women also, but they wrote a lot of essays and poetry that were extremely influential in the American culture at the time. They wrote some very important works that still have impact today. So Ralph Waldo Emerson is one of them. Probably one of his most famous essays is Nature. I think probably a lot of us have read at least parts of these in like high school literature courses or maybe college literature courses. I'm quite sure that I read at least portions of most of these authors just because they were so foundational in helping to create American culture, and their works are referenced by other works. So anyway, Nature is probably one of the most commonly referenced ones and commonly read works by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And then Henry David Thoreau, Walden, definitely, and Civil Disobedience is another one by him. Those are essays. And then Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote some novels, including The Scarlet Letter, which, as I was telling my kids, basically everybody reads that in high school, because we were talking about going to Boston, and I was saying we were talking about what each of us most wants to do on our vacation when we're there and what things we want to prioritize. And I mentioned something about, Nathaniel Hawthorne having been from there. And my oldest son was like, who? I was like, well, he wrote The Scarlet Letter. I was like, I can guarantee you're going to be reading it in the next few years, because he's a freshman in high school. He's like, oh yeah, that's in the book list for my junior year. It's like, yep. Every American high schooler reads The Scarlet Letter, I think. And then The House of Seven Gables also, which I am hoping to see. I believe it's the house that inspired the story, I think. And that is in Boston. And then William Ellery Channing also wrote a lot of essays. And then this is one that is, I guess, only tangentially related. I'm not sure that Alcott and Longfellow ran in the same circles per se, although Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was a close friend of Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he wrote poems that many American children used to recite in elementary school. I'm not sure that they still do. He kind of fell out of favor with the higher critics in literary circles. I think probably because of the strong biblical overtone of a lot of his works. In part, maybe not entirely, but at least in part. So anyway, he has some poems that you have probably read or even memorized, like Paul Revere's Ride, The Song of Hiawatha, Evangeline, and The Village Blacksmith. I know for sure I memorized Paul Revere's Ride and The Village Blacksmith when I was in school. So anyway, he has a lot of great poetry that you can read. And he did live in Boston for at least, he wasn't born in Boston, but he did live in Boston at some point. So totally works as a neighbor of Alcott's. And finally, my prompt was to read a short story by Louisa May Alcott. And I have a whole book called The Hidden Louisa May Alcott. And it's 2 volumes in one, a collection of her unknown thrillers. So it's just short stories and maybe novella length, but none of them are very long. And these are more like her Blood and Thunder kind of stories that are adventure kind of things, mysteries, that sort of stuff. But she has collections of short stories that are more along the lines of, Little Women. She called it moral pep for the young. That's what she called those kind of stories. So they're just sweet children's stories mostly. If you go to, I think you can find most of them on Project Gutenberg, or you can find them on a website called AmericanLiterature.com, and they just have the text on there. You can just click on the link and read it right there. She wrote several collections. A few of them, their names are Flower Fables, which was one of her first short story collections, and one of her first ever published works, I think. And that was written for Ralph Waldo Emerson's daughter. So it's, short stories, sweet stories. I've not read any of them, but that sounds like a good one to start with. And then there's Aunt Joe's Scrap Bag. So these are short stories as if Joe Bear would be telling them to her children and her charges in her school. And then Proverbs stories and Spinning Wheel stories are some other titles of short story collections that you can readily find online for Louisa May Alcott. So those are all of the prompts for Alcott April and the ones that I'm likely to read or am going to be choosing from. Now, as for the rest of my reading plans for April, I participate in several reading challenges. If you watch my channel regularly, you may remember some of them that I mention every month. One of them is the What the Dickens Facebook book club. They are reading Peter Pan this month. I have read Peter Pan. It's not my favorite children's novel, and I have a lot of other books that I want to get to more in the month of April. So let me just double check, because now I'm thinking maybe that was the May one. I just want to make sure. Look at my list. Nope, that's April. Yeah. So I think I'm going to pass on that one for April and pick up with them again in May. So for the classics reading challenge, the challenge is to read, and this is with the Tea and Ink Society, the challenge is to read an epistolary novel. So I am hoping to choose one from my list of books that inspired Louisa May Alcott. And among them, as far as epistolary novels, Julie by Jean-Jacques Rousseau seems like it is an epistolary novel. I think one of the Samuel Johnson ones is, but I'm not ready for that right now. And I feel like there was another one in the list. Why can I not think? Oh, Evelina. Evelina was the other one. Evelina is also a epistolary novel. So my decision is going to be, do I want to reread a book that I read before, like Evelina, because it's been a few years, I've forgotten a lot of it. I would like to reread it at some point. Am I ready for the reread yet? I don't know. Or do I want to read another book? I have never read anything by Rousseau. I'm not really sure that I want to. He's not ever been on my list of authors I feel like I absolutely have to read. I will say I am pretty sure this book was also mentioned in Belinda by Mariah Edgeworth, which quite a few people read for Feb Regency. That was a group read, but I didn't read it then. I had previously read it, but I'm pretty sure that that book is mentioned there as well. So highly influential to authors of the 19th century, or at least they mentioned it in their books. So I kind of want to read that. I also read a Goodreads review where the person said that they were comparing it to the Twilight series, not in storyline or content necessarily, but more in its reception by teenage girls, because both of them are like gushingly romantic. Apparently, I don't know, haven't read either one. So I just found that comparison very interesting. This epistolary novel from the 18th century compared with Twilight from the early 21st century. And I am really curious now after reading that review. So I might read that one. I'm sure I can find it on Project Gutenberg or somewhere like that. But I also kind of want to read Faust for this category. So we'll see which one I actually pick up. Probably it will be Julie. I'm gonna say that right now, but subject to change. All of these things are subject to change. And then for the Read Your Shelf Challenge, for the month of April, you actually can, this is the chance to switch tracks. Like if you're on the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle track, then you might be able to switch to the Alicia Montgomery track because the prompts are the same. And so then next month you can go either way. And the prompt is to read a book with a red-haired main character. And I never did get to this book in March. So Anne of Windy Poplars, and I really want to reread this one. It's been on my list for a while. So I'm hoping to get to it in April, even though I have a lot of other stuff that I want to read, a lot of Alcott stuff. I'm still hoping to get to this. Currently, I'm still working through Mansfield Park, which was for the same challenge as this one. So I want to finish that one first. So we'll bump this to April and put that on my April TBR. And finally, I'm very excited about this. Erin Facer is wanting to read Les Miserables, and quite a few people on his channel expressed interest in joining him and reading that. So he set up a Boxer group, and so we are going to be doing a group read of Les Miserables in April. And I have not read that book since I was a teenager. I've memorized the musical, but that is not the same as reading the book. So I am going to read the book with great pleasure. I am looking forward to it immensely. And I have a gorgeous copy of it, beautiful copy of Les Miserables right here. So now it is really big and heavy. So I am not bringing this anywhere with me. This would be like reading only at home, strictly. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful. Love this. But we were talking about translations in the Boxer group, and someone was sharing an article about the various translations of Les Miserables, and there is a newer translation than the one this edition uses. And I think this is a decent translation, but there's a newer one that is widely considered to be one of the best. So I may get that one on Kindle. I can't remember if it's available through my library, but it's only like $10 or $11, I think, to read it on Kindle. So I may get that one and read that one instead. And just have this one for looks because it's so beautiful. We'll see. But regardless, I'm definitely going to be reading Les Miserables in April. I'm going to be skipping probably the, or at least skimming his tangent chapters because he's known for those. There was one in particular about Paris sewers that I forced myself the first time I read it. I forced myself to read all of them, to read all of the tangents, including the Paris sewers. But yeah, I don't feel a need to do that again. Yeah, completely unnecessary. And those chapters are like, you can read them and not miss anything that's happening in the actual story. But there's still quite a lot of story left. Like it's still a pretty big book, even taking out those tangents. So anyway, regardless, I am looking very much forward to reading Les Miserables in April. It may take me longer than April to read it, but I'm going to start it in April. And I'm enjoying reading it with other people because that has been so much fun, reading buddy reads and group reads with people and getting to discuss and get different perspectives on the book. So that will be a lot of fun and I'm looking forward to it. So those are my plans for April, and some ideas and suggestions for you for Alcott April if you are looking for suggestions as you are creating your TBRs for April. And additionally, next week I am going to be in Boston, so I'm hoping to do a little bit of vlogging while I'm there. So the week after that, I'll probably post like some shorts and some things on Instagram in the moment while we're there. But I'm going to make some videos after that about our trip and some of the literary things at the bookstores and all that kind of stuff that we're going to go to. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I hope you will enjoy that. So that is April and Alcott April. I hope you enjoy. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions or if any of these sound interesting to you that you are going to read and how you are going to participate in Alcott April. And I would love to continue talking with you. I'll put all the links in the comments box for everything that you need to access for the month. And I will see you next time. Bye.